Megan 18, welcome to what I like to call the Little Book of Proptech.
Thank you.
You've been very kindly and bravely nominated by Amy Shields from Sprift. I think she wanted to punish you for something you've done. I don't know what it is. So you
I'm
have
sure
to
there's a
spend
Christmas
your evening
party
with
story
me.
there.
So did you, you currently work for Davis Tate, don't
Yeah.
you?
Yeah.
And so Amy was once at Davis Tate as well.
She was.
Did your paths cross at that time?
Yeah, absolutely. So we were, we were both at Team DT together. So she ran our Twyford office and I run the lettings out of our Reading office. So we always cross paths, mainly just for having a chat. I'm not sure how much work was done between us, but hopefully no one picks up on that too much.
She's a great chatter, I have to tell you.
We've already had a chat today.
We spent an hour together the other day, and I think we could have gone on for about 3 or 4 of those hours. But no, really, really awesome. I'm quite impressed with what Amy's doing these days at Sprift. But we're here to talk about you, not her. So forget about her.
Who even is Amy Shields? Sorry, Amy, I don't mean it.
I don't know. So Megan, tell us, I mean, obviously now we know where you are now, but how did you first come into the industry? What was your first introduction to property like?
So my mum was an estate agent.
Okay.
And so when I was little and I was off sick from school, I'd have to go sit in the back of her office, which is actually now our Davis Tate Reading Common office, strangely enough. So I used to sit at the back of her office and play with the typewriter. That was pretty much the start of it. I had absolutely no intention of being an estate agent. I was actually going to university to be a journalist, and then went and did a ski season, just came back and went, not ready to be at uni yet. So my mum was like, oh, well, we could get you a job typing up property brochures in the office. And I was like, yeah, that sounds fine. So I did that for a summer, probably at 8 months, and then went and did another season. And then when I came back, I thought, well, what do I do now? I don't have any desire to be a journalist anymore. So I thought, oh, well, I'll see if I can get a job back in property. And got a job at Chancellor's as a property manager. So I did that for 9 months or so. And then I went back to the agency that I was a typist at and became a junior. So that was at Farmer and Dyer, which is a small independent in Caversham in Reading. And then from there, I went to Davis Tate after about 5 years with F&D, and then I've been there ever since. So it's been, they've had a lot of growing years for me at DT. So I started there as a Meg, and I've kind of whizzled my way through and like piece of the furniture.
And do you love it?
Yeah, I do. I really love my job, and I feel really lucky that I found a job that I love so much completely by accident.
But isn't it funny how so many people you speak to in property, and I ask this question from everybody, like, how did you get into it? And very few people tell me, oh, that's all I've ever wanted to be. In fact, I got a job application last week from somebody, not that we're recruiting, but somebody sent their CV in and they said, oh, we watch all of your videos. I'm very interested in property, and that's what I want to do, and I want to learn about it. That's rare, isn't it, in our industry? Yeah. A lot of the people that we speak to and that we deal with sort of fell into it by accident. They started a job. I mean, I started pretty much the same way that you did. So your job was typing property details. My job was even more glamorous. I was sticking the photos onto the detail sheet in the days before color printers. That was my job.
I do feel like I've devalued my initial role. I also ordered the HIP reports. Do you remember those?
Oh, I remember the HIP reports.
Yeah, they lasted a long time.
In fact, I had a discussion today with a supplier on whether or not HIP reports are the way forward, actually.
I mean, if they're not £500, maybe we would have a chance. But, you know.
Well, they can be done. I think the bits of the HIP report that we want to see is we want everybody to get the searches done. We want their inquiries kind of all raised. We want them sale ready from day one. But it's a whole other experience. Your focus is very much on lettings, isn't it?
Yeah, so I'm dual qualified on both, and I do a bit of both, but lettings has got my heart. So sales, you know, I'm okay to pitch in, and I like doing it, but lettings is bizarrely, and for all my sins, lettings is my soul.
It's interesting. I was speaking to somebody today, and you'll hear her interview. It's Michelle Killoran, and she's been through the industry in a few different roles, and we were talking about her experiences as a woman in a state agency, because she started off 20 years ago when the climate was very, very different, and the sort of men operating in the industry were extremely different to the guys that are around today, I hope, in terms of what we know, what we've learned, and what we understand now to be correct, as opposed to some of the outdated viewpoints that they used to have. But her view was, interestingly, that lettings was where women kind of got dumped in as much as they were never really progressed into the sales roles, and they were encouraged to go off and get stuck into management. Do you sort of agree with that? Do you think that's still true today?
I think yes and no. I think that it was interesting. I actually watched a lot of webinars on International Women's Day, and our lettings director at Davis Tate, Georgina Wakeman, she's one of the lettings directors. She actually made a really good point about why women often do well in lettings as opposed to forced to be there. And lettings is one of those jobs that you have to have lots of different hats for. You know, you have to be able to sell the property in a sense. You have to be able to negotiate. You have to be able to understand legislation. You have to be able to care about the situation. But you also have to be able to spot when people aren't telling you quite the full picture, because let's face it, if you put a bad tenant into a property, you will know about it and you will regret it. You know, and that, I think, as women, we are historically quite good at putting on the different hats, you know, working.
Whoa, guys, you heard it here first. Megan 18 has just said that all women are human lie detectors. Be careful, be careful.
We're watching you, boys, don't worry. So no, I think that's a really good way of looking at it, that we are naturally able to multitask. It's almost like a running joke, isn't it, that women can do more tasks in one go.
And that's 100% correct.
Yeah,
I'm struggling to speak and think at the same time now.
I think the problem with, like, for me with sales, I always really enjoyed sales, but there was always a lot more walls up, you know, not just necessarily in terms of your employer. I actually think I've always worked for really liberal employers, but I think as you know, I'd turn up to evaluation at sort of 23, you know, hi, it's Megan here, and you could almost see, like, in their face, like, you know, and even now as a manager, I still get situations where I remember I had a complaint come through, and they said, "Oh, I'll put you through to my manager. She'll help you." And she'll like, "A girl, you know, a woman, you know, well, who's her manager?" I'm like, "Well, 2 females. So, you know, which one do you want to
take your pick, buddy?" Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's probably why we settle into lettings.
Okay, do you know what? I actually like that explanation a lot better than what I heard today, because although I'm sure that Michelle's point of view is correct in some companies, you know, they were parked out of the way because sales was always seen as being a much more kind of aggressively, almost toxic masculinity arena, if you like, because it was that caveman mentality of we're going to go out and bag another sale, and it was a much more kind of hit your targets. Whereas I think lettings, you get involved with the minutiae of there's a lot of detail there, a hell of a lot of detail in legislation. You've got to have those people skills to be able to calm the situation down, because let's face it, some of the phone calls that you receive from an angry tenant, you know, it is, you're on the back foot from picking up the phone. So you need to really calm that stuff down. Yeah. And landlords occasionally, not the most reasonable people in the world historically either. Sometimes some of them are amazing, and some of them are the opposite of that and need a little bit of educating and hand-holding. So I think that's probably, it probably takes quite a bit of skill to be able to deliver that.
And I think, you know, if you think about that typical bloke that you've just referred to, you know, we actually, if you think about the stereotypical, you know, multi-landlord, for example, occasionally I'll turn up to a property and they'll almost be like, I know everything already. And I think, well, no, let's talk about what you know. And actually, quite often, that's a good way of going in. And I think sometimes when you send in too much ego or too much masculinity or too much aggression, people don't respond well to that, and they go, well, I know what I'm talking about, you know what you're talking about, we're not going to work together. And actually, I think that slightly different approach works. I go do sales valuations too, and I'll turn up, and often if there's been a lady that maybe doesn't feel quite comfortable in that kind of approach, and she'll go, thank God it's a woman, someone different. But then we've got some fantastic sales agents as well. Amy was one of them. A massive loss to us, but a great loss, great gain for Proptech was losing Amy. But, someone like that is a very different kettle of fish to me, but we're just different agents and both got our own kind of groove. Yeah.
No, that's really interesting. So in terms of letting, see, I've been stalking you today to try and in an effort to learn more about my guest. In a very short time, I went to the place that all international super spies go to find out about people, and apparently that's LinkedIn. I couldn't find you on TikTok, so I had to go to LinkedIn instead.
I've just started a lettings TikTok only last week.
Do you know
all
what?
Of my sins.
I wondered whether TikTok could be leveraged for our businesses, and I thought, no, it's the wrong generation, it will never be done. And then I came across a butcher who shows people how he cuts the meat, and he explains different cuts of meat, where it came from. And I thought you could actually do that with bits of lettings legislation. You could explain things to landlords, and easy to I think there's loads you could do.
Well, and that's what I did. So I sat on a social media training course put on by one of our ARLA reps, and there was a lot of talk about TikTok, and I thought, do you know what, I'm not exactly like my early 20s anymore, so I'm not sure I can get away with doing TikTok dances online. But I actually put a video up, and I had loads of response asking questions about pets and how to get, landlords to do X, Y, and Z. And I put a video up about dogs, and I had 28,000 hits on that one video in 24 hours.
People love dogs, don't they?
I mean, I've got 3. My dog made the video. So
really?
Yeah.
Cool. 3 dogs and 1 toddler.
Yeah, I'm a mum of 4.
And who gives you more grief, the dogs or the toddler?
Probably the dogs. Controversially, they were very spoiled until Dexter came, and I think now they're working against me.
So, talking about juggling, being a mum of 4, with what is a massive career in terms of what you've achieved and what you've done, and we'll go into a little bit more detail. But could be forgiven for being really ignorant and thinking that these two things can't be balanced and they can't be done. I learned a new phrase whilst I was on your LinkedIn today. Wait, I'm going to dig it out because this is important. Let me see if I can find it. Here we go. It was entitled, Let's Talk About ROPA. And you used the phrase hyperemesis gravidarum. Go on, say it properly for me.
Hyperemesis.
That's amazing. That's like a spell from Harry Potter right there.
Oh, you've just won my heart right there.
So really, though, to take the Harry Potter glamour out of it,
it's not as
what we're
glamorous.
talking about is hurling, aren't we?
Yeah. So I don't know if you remember when Kate Middleton was pregnant with the first. Oh God, that's awful. I can't remember his name.
Is it Archie?
No, that's Megan. What's the first? What's the one that's going to be king called? Oh God, this is awful.
Simba.
Yeah. So when she was pregnant with baby Simba.
I told you this was a really serious podcast, didn't I?
So when she was pregnant with Simba, she got hospitalized with this really horrific morning sickness that just lasted the whole way through. And I was the same. I wish it was as glamorous as being like Kate Middleton, but sadly it was not. And so I pretty much held from about 7 weeks all the way through till I gave birth.
That's a lot of hurling.
It was very interesting. I think the moment I realized that I was pregnant was when I threw up in a bin in my ARLA exam for doing my fellowship, and I was like, oh,
did you get it?
Of course I got it.
Of course she did. Extra points for hurling in the ARLA
10 points to Gryffindor.
So go on, so talk about, because this is fascinating. As a man, I can hardly multitask anything, but you guys grow a human being inside you and still carry on doing your exams. You're still able to do your work, and it's not stopped your career dead in its tracks. But it is still a challenge, a monumental challenge. How have you coped with it?
Do you know what? It's when I fell pregnant, I was over the moon, but I absolutely was convinced that was my career over. I knew I didn't want it to be my career over, but sadly, that's kind of how it felt. And I actually really kept it quite low key when it came to my clients, because I also didn't want them to think I was going to go off on maternity leave and never come back. And so I just sort of, wore big coats and sort of pretended like it wasn't happening, and just like I walked with a bit of a waddle towards the end. So for me, I very much was like, I'm not letting this stop, but obviously I need to understand my limits. So I was adamant I wanted to become a FARLA. That was a massive thing for me. And I'd finally plucked up the courage to do it. And I was sitting my first exam when I realised that I think I was pregnant. So for me, I managed to get all bar one exam done in that time that I was pregnant. And I think it's about a 2-year course normally, but I was like, no, I've got to get it done before the baby gets here. And then obviously when he was here, I took a few months to, look after the child, and then started.
It's all right. You can admit to being a mum for a bit. It's
I know. And honestly,
okay. It's not a dirty word.
It's not. And I think for me, pregnant Megan was convinced this was it, game over. And it took a lot of working out how that balance was going to work.
Yeah.
But actually, I think it's made me a better agent, maybe controversially, because I completely empathise now with people when they come into my office and they're really heavily pregnant, wanting to move house. I'm thinking, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? But I also understand like how those feelings make you need a bigger house or, more space or whatever. So I think it's made me a better agent. It's softened me, I think, a little bit, which is good.
So we ended up moving house 2 weeks before our first child arrived. And one of us, the pregnant one of us, woke up one day and decided, that's it, we're not having a child in this place, we're going to move. And it all happened so very quickly. But it's true, every time we've moved, it's always been centered around either somebody arriving, and there is, it's one of those things that you kind of do appreciate your living space a little bit more, and then it does make you empathize with people that turn up and seem to be in an awful hurry to get somewhere, and you think to yourself, the unpregnant version of you thinks, what on earth are you doing? I mean, this is really not the time to be moving and packing boxes. But nesting is a very real thing, and it's a very real reason for moving house.
It is funny though, because I remember I did a birthing course before I had Dexter, and I sat there and a lady said, oh, I'm having a home birth, and I was like, oh, tell me everything. I don't want to make a mess on my carpet. I want it all like really sterile. Like
I want to get my deposit back after I move out of the house.
And she lived in a flat, and I was like, do you have to get consent from your freeholder for that? And I remember her looking at me thinking, what are you on about? And then I was like, oh, Megan, shut up. Like, not everyone cares about the house.
Megan, always bringing work into the birthing pool with you. Leave it at home. Leave it in the office.
Absolutely.
So that's fascinating. So now, obviously, you're back at work, and you're balancing it all tremendously well from the looks of things. I mean, we spoke earlier, and you were multitasking again. You were rocking a toddler to bed whilst doing something else. And do you feel that one thing pulls on your time more than another? Is there a time where you think, shit, I'm not spending enough time doing one or the other?
Yeah, I definitely think that you have to take a step back when you want to be a working mum with a job that you want to do properly, a full-time job. So for me, I found that at the start it much harder, whereas now I feel like we've got a really good balance of time with Dex and time at work. And obviously, depending on, things, they flex, and some days I probably give too much to one side. This week Dex was off poorly, and, that directs your attention in a different way. But that's okay, and I think as long as you work for an employer that
respects family, then you'll never go wrong. That's the key there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Not everybody has that sort of understanding employer out there. There are still those that sort of think it's a massive inconvenience to them, to you, to everybody, and they just don't want to have to deal with it. Tell me, what does young Dex think about what mummy does for a living?
I don't think he quite understands. So I tell him that I work in a shop that we sell houses out of, and I think he kind of thinks it's like toys, a toy shop, and he just come in and.
So my kids were the same until I got to the stage where I actually brought them into work on a couple of days whilst they were on holiday, and they sort of helped out in the office. And when I say helped out, they polished off all the digestive biscuits that we had in the office. Pretty much broke the photocopier and, did fun stuff like photocopying body parts and things. Kids, man, that's what they do.
Oh, I got into a state agency, let's not forget.
that is the beginning of our story. But eventually, my youngest, she looked at me and she goes, "Now I understand what you do, Daddy. You sell pictures of houses." It's not a million miles away from the truth, to be honest with you.
No, that's true. To be fair, though, the one thing I would say is, and it's that you as a estate agent, people, you kind of get it, but like when we walk past one of our boards and we cover quite a big patch with other offices, like we always have to walk past and like, "Dexter, what do? We salute."
There's another one. Fantastic. So maybe an estate agent in the making there.
I kind of I was hoping more on the lines of like a professional skier or something, a bit cooler, but we'll take it.
I don't know. I think estate agency is becoming cooler. It is. I think we're entering the golden age of estate agency now. There seems to be, in my opinion, and I know that a lot of the old timers, and we're talking about people that sort of went through it all in the 60s and 70s, they'll tell you, that was the heyday of estate agency. But I think we are in an unprecedented era of sharing knowledge, of having discussions. I mean, what you and I are doing now, we've never met before. We didn't know each other before, I don't know, 2 minutes ago. We were connected by another colleague in the industry, but these conversations would never have happened. If I would have told you, I don't know, 10 years ago, that you'd be having a televised chat with some bloke you've never met on a Thursday night who's going to ask you about your vomiting habits whilst you were pregnant, you'd say, yeah, I just don't think that's going to happen. But here we are, we're learning from one another. And I actually, when I look at my LinkedIn stream and my feed on Facebook or Twitter or whatever it is that I'm looking at, TikTok, but whatever it is that I'm scrolling through, it's mostly, there's a lot of video content out there, but there's a lot of questions being asked. Can you help me with this? And do you know about that? Has anybody else experienced that? The estate agency industry that I grew up in, and I started out, in the olden days, probably about 25 years ago. But when I did, it was an extremely paranoid space where agents never spoke to one another unless it was to say, hey, you've done something really wrong and don't do it again or else.
Yeah.
But today we live in a very open environment. So is that something that you're sort of very much aware of? Was there a turning point for you where you kind of woke
definitely.
up?
I mean, I know exactly what you mean. Because actually, I've been doing this job for 13, 14 years. And, as a junior, I never really got it when people used to come in for keys. I'd be like, hi, how are you? Perky little 18-year-old at the door. And I think that as the years went on, I think that the generation of the negs then coming through, the people, my sort of generation, it started to change a little bit. I worked as an independent agency, and actually George, he's still there. He used to come in, and we really needed another neg. And he used to come in, and I'd go, come sit in my chair, come sit here. You could have this desk if you wanted it.
One day, all of this.
All this could be yours, and eventually it worked, and he still works there. Funny enough, I actually left about 6 months after he started, but after a good year of harassment. But actually, I'm still friends with him now, and that's come off him coming to collect keys, and we were direct competition. And I think actually we don't need that in life now, and there are agents that still want to do that, and that's fine. You crack on, but actually the agents like us and others in the area, you get so much more you know, and I know that if I'm in a position where I can't sell or let a property, and I really can't, I've tried everything, and they're just like, look, I'm going to try somebody else, God forbid somebody else, I'll go, let me put you in touch with somebody that is decent, and I'll then pass them to that.
You know
person.
what, that is the most, I think, painful conversation that you can have, is to say goodbye to a client where it's just not working out, and you've kind of done everything that you can to keep them, but you know it's probably best for them and best for you for them to move on. I think it takes a type of wisdom and courage, if you like, to be able to turn around to that same client and go, before you go, I want you to have the best service possible, and I think he's going to or she's going to give you the best service, so let me put you in touch with them. And that, I think, is the ultimate sign of kind of maturity, when you're able to do that, and it actually gives you a feel-good feeling, doesn't it, really?
It does. You know, I don't leave bad blood when I am in that situation. Ultimately, for whatever reason, it's not working out, and it happens, sadly, you know. So for me, I'd much rather they were with an agent that is good for them, that understands them, it's going to look after them, rather than them going to a really awful agent that you just don't want it to happen to. And actually, it's normally a lot of the awful agents are the ones that have been like chucking it down their throat the whole way through, and you're like, just take a breather, let's talk about it. And actually, it often works that way.
But that's between competing agents. So we've spoken about sort of attitudes between competing agents, and how we're becoming a bit more open and reasonable with one another. And I think we're all gaining from that. I think the knowledge base that we now have collectively, we're just able to provide a much better level of service than ever before, because I can pick up the phone and say, hey, Megan, you're not going to earn a bean off this, but if you spend the next 10 minutes telling me how you'd handle this, when you need help on something else, you can call whenever you want.
Definitely.
I think it's a great system. But what's interesting is those competitive cultures, not so much in independent agencies, but they did sort of occur also in those environments, but definitely in the corporate system. That kind of dog-eat-dog attitude between even a manager and a junior neg, and they were all kind of backstabbing each other, and no one ever gave each other credit or help. And I have interviewed people that have come to me from major sort of corporate backgrounds where the churn of staff is incredible, but the churn of staff is incredible because of the attitudes within an agency. So you run your branch over there. How do you sort of instill that working spirit of cooperation amongst your staff?
Do you know what? I think we've got a really nice balance just at Davis Tate in general. So Charlie, who runs our branch, he runs the sort of sales side. I run the letting side. Me and Charlie are like completely different people, but we work really well together. And I think that we breed that nice environment for people. But I think the be all end all is we make office commission. So rather than everyone fighting for the leads and scrapping for the viewings, we all work together, you know. So if, you know, Sam lets a property or Tristan sells a property, we all benefit from that. So we all like, yeah, you go get it. So the competition is almost like a little bit of more of an ego thing rather than a financial thing.
It's a friendly.
It's friendly competition. And you know, obviously we'll chuck a bottle of booze in there now and again, and you know, and all of that. We've got this little sandwich place around the corner called Sam's Wraps, which apparently are the way to motivate any boy in their 20s to do good deals.
Boy in their 20s, this boy in his 40s is coming down to see you guys just as soon as I can. I'm having wraps and a champagne. That's what I've been promised.
Caribbean jerk chicken wraps ready to go.
Oh, I'm on my way. So we touched on it earlier, and I think anybody that comes across your profile will see that you are very much ARLA, you're very much Propertymark, and you were talking there about getting your FARLA qualification. And, you know, my running joke is like, how do you know somebody's a vegan? Well, because they're going to tell you. But how do you know someone's a member of ARLA? Because they're going to tell you. But the people that are members of ARLA and people who are members of Propertymark were always very sort of proud of that pedigree, if you like, in terms of their knowledge, their background, and what those two names or brands meant to our industry, and also to members of the public, because for a long time it was sold as, look, you know, these are the sort of qualifications that are the hallmark of a decent estate agent, that knows their stuff, that has been trained, that really does abide by a code of standards that really are beyond compare within the industry. And for the longest time, that always was the way. And it felt like, from an outsider's point of view, I was once ARLA and NAEA as well. And I was extremely proud. I had my 2 little badges on my lapels. I looked like a bit of a geek. And I remember sitting up all night to study for the... I was placed in the most ridiculous scenario where I had no qualifications at all. But we had bought a business where the director of that business had to stand down as a director because we bought it off him. And therefore, we were about to lose our NEA and ARLA status for that reason. And I was told, you need to go and do this tomorrow morning. So I remember buying like a 6-pack of Red Bull, and I just stayed up all night, and I went in and I took all of these modules of exams in one morning, and I managed to make it through in the end. But I was tremendously proud of that, because finally I belonged to that club that I've been hearing about for so long. And then at some point it seemed to lose its way slightly. The leadership went a bit wishy-washy. The things that they said in the press didn't feel like they were talking for me or for the rest of my industry, and they really seemed to struggle. That's changing now, isn't it? We've gone back the other way.
Yeah, obviously, as a newly appointed representative, I'm going to say that it's absolutely on the change. No, so I think I always think back to school when it comes to your qualifications. So there was always the kids in class that, let's talk about the successful kids of your school, not the ones that just, disappeared and we never saw them again. But there were the kind of charismatic, popular kids that always achieved, okay grades. And then there was the kids like me that were a bit geeky, that always had to work to make sure they could compete with those people. And I think estate agency is exactly the same. And so for me, all through life, I've always felt like knowledge is power. So the more I learn, the better I'll be. And I remember very clearly sitting in an ARLA training session before I was ARLA with Calvin, who we ran the lettings for Farmer and Dyer. And they said, we went around the room and then, what do you want to achieve? And people were all really like flouncy about it. And Calvin went, we just want to stop winging it. And I was like, yeah.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. That's making it up as you go along.
Yeah, this is too complicated to wing it. Sales obviously has loads of different factors to it, but lettings, it's so easy to mess up. And I think unless you have that knowledge, it's difficult to then preach it to landlords, tenants, whoever.
Yeah.
So I think Nathan coming in, who is our current temporary sort of leader as such, has really invigorated that. And do you know what I think it is that he is an agent, and I think he gets
makes a huge difference, a massive difference.
Yeah, and obviously we lost David just before I took over my stint as a rep, and he was obviously an amazing ambassador for ARLA, unbelievable legislation knowledge, just charismatic. He's
gone over to the dark side now, right?
But, all power to him, because he's amazing to watch even now. But obviously that was big shoes to fill. And huge, yeah. I feel like Nathan, I'm seeing him popping up on different videos on LinkedIn, and, he turns up to all the meetings, and he's just the guy, he's got it. Whatever it is, he's got it.
It's about visibility and accountability. It's what we want from our politicians. We very rarely get it, but it's what we want. But it's what we want from our celebrities these days, and it's what we want from our leadership, and even lay leadership. I think we want people that are willing to be vocal.
Yeah.
What Amy Shields calls shouty. But you can be shouty and you can be vocal, but and still be relevant, and still sort of tell the industry what it is that they need to hear, because they do need reassurance. And something that you ARLA peeps probably always thought, but never really get to hear it enough, is that you represent all of us, whether we're ARLA or not.
Yeah.
And so therefore we need a very strong vocal mouthpiece that's standing up for us, because it seems sometimes that our industry is an afterthought on a governmental level, that we get loads of legislation chucked our way, and the lives of landlords and particularly lettings agents are turned upside down almost seems periodic, like every sort of 9 months or so, somebody says, hey, and by the way, this is now what you've got to do.
Let's test electrics.
Let's make life different. But, that's an expensive, the introduction of a basic standard for electrical testing and certification, and the fact that landlords needed that. Let's face it, it's easy for us to say that they should do it, but it's an expensive move for some landlords to make. And as a lettings agent, you have to make that awkward call to a landlord and go, listen, pal, the regulations are changing, and I'm afraid we don't, no way around this. We need to send somebody in. And you and I know that unless it's been rewired in the last 12 months, it's going to need some remedial work. And it's not a cheap story.
No.
So I, my hats go off to everybody that's been working in the lettings industry, ARLA or not ARLA, but you've had to deal with really negotiating with existing happy clients for a long time, and to keep them happy throughout a period where, let's face it, rental income has been a bit iffy during COVID anyway, and there are lots of different things on the horizon, and still to get it all done, it's tremendous.
Just very emotional, isn't it?
It is.
I think the thing is as well, and I know that there's a lot of controversy around ROPA and qualifications and all of that, and I totally understand, having come from agency background where qualifications wasn't the be all end all, and it's a personal preference. The thing that always stands is exactly what you've just said. So the pandemic hit, it was rough. It's been rough for everybody. What you were saying to Amy the other day about being frontline totally resonated with me. But, come January, Boris sat there and went, right, sorry, guys, everybody, we're back to square one. And then all of a sudden it came through and it was like, oh, okay, we're not on that list.
Special.
Well, we're special, but they won't give us essential status. So therefore you can't send your kids to school.
So I saw your post on this, and I actually, at the time that it happened, I had spoken to, do you know a guy? Well, if you don't know him, check him out. I interviewed him a couple of weeks ago, a guy called McGee. He works in an estate agency and his wife's a school teacher. And I asked him, hey, Tom, I guess you're back at work like everybody else. He said, oh, we're juggling because, my wife has to go into school because she's a key worker. And I said, and obviously you're a key worker as well. But then it occurred to me that there was no provision in place for key worker status for agents, and you were campaigning for it. You wrote letters on behalf, and I just thought, wow, that's my future president of ARLA right there.
But that's the problem, is that I think that, as I said, forget what people think about qualifications. It's taken somebody, from ARLA, somebody that actually, gives a crap about us as an industry and us as a future. And actually, as a parent, I've just gone, this is ridiculous, so I'm considered important enough to work, but not important enough to get that, and I wasn't suggesting that we needed jabs and we needed all this, we didn't need a clap on a Thursday.
Yeah.
What I just wanted to be able to do is send our children to school and actually maybe get a card, and then I can drive my car after reviewing and not get stopped by the police. That's all I wanted. And I sent out, because obviously I look after Oxfordshire and Berkshire, sent out an email to all my members like, look, guys, this is what I'm doing. If you've got any situations that have happened, I'd really appreciate it if you could just ping me an email. And I had tons. And I emailed every MP that covers Oxfordshire and Berkshire, and I had absolutely no response every time I did it. Not one.
Okay. Is that, so this is my next question. And you know what? If Nathan was sat in your chair right now, I'd ask him the same thing. Are we as an industry, when we're talking truth to power, when we're talking to governmental ministers about the property industry, do they care about us? Do they have any inkling of what it's like within our industry? Do they realize that making great headlines with certain changes to legislation may be a vote winner for them, but almost it has the ability to crush an entire industry if they're not careful? So I wondered whether or not anybody in Westminster was actually listening to people like you and me. And should we forgive those MPs because it was the height of Corona and they were up to their elbows and dealing with it? Or is that actually indicative of government's attitude to our industry?
Cool. That is a good question.
It's a good one, isn't it?
That's a good one.
It's a zinger.
That is a spicy question.
But it's a great question because I actually when what's the housing minister, Robert Jenrick, or who the communities homes and communities minister?
I wrote to him too, by the way. Didn't respond.
Oh, he didn't respond. I think he's too busy doing other things. He's a very important man, don't you know? But Jenrick, when he stood up and said, and let's face it, as an industry, we never heard him stand up and say it. We were sent Twitter updates forwarded by an MP. I'll never forget the time that David Cox sat there in a Rightmove webinar talking about proposed changes, where Miles Shipside then turned around to him and said, we're just getting this news through now, David. The updated legislation's coming through. And he handed him a sort of stack of papers, and David had to sit there, bless his cotton socks, and read out what the new laws were to be with regards to our industry. And it was still extremely scant in terms of detail and reassurance and so on. But when Jenrick sent us back to work, I thought to myself, why has that happened? How have I suddenly gone from being the least important person on the planet to somebody that was now allowed to go back to work as essential? And it occurred to me that it wasn't me or you that he was particularly concerned about, but he was concerned about the house building industry, and that's worth a lot of money to a lot of people in government, and that they need the apparatus to be able to sell those units that they've built. And that's the way they look at it, units. You and I look at it as homes, and it's very, very different. Yeah, of course. And I thought to myself, well, actually, that's how it works. So I kind of hoped that, and I am hoping, and my question was a little bit loaded to you before, and I'm sorry if it was too loaded. No. But I guess why I'm explaining this now is that I feel that we do need a strong mouthpiece. We need somebody that's willing, able, and ready to stand up to government and to really make sure that our voice is heard properly, whether or not we're worth as much to those to the government as house builders are. But if we know by extended logic that the house builders need us to sell houses, well then by extension we've got a little bit of power here, right?
Yeah, I think so. It's just, do you know what, it's a really difficult one because I kind of flitted with different views on it at the time. I think we were almost as an industry too scared to be like, well, are we essential enough to be essential? Because unfortunately, you know, when they did a popularity rank, we ranked below parking attendants as being, or park traffic, you know, like the ticket people. I think their title now. We ranked below that, and I was
traffic wardens.
Traffic wardens, that's it. So we ranked below traffic wardens in terms of popularity and like being trustworthy. And I just think, for me, I was a bit like, oh, I don't want to shout about this too much because I don't want people to be like, well, who do you think you are? You're not a nurse. And I think. And I think there was an element of that. But I think the problem we've got is that we were the roadmap out of this lockdown. You know, we shut down back in March. I had the great pleasure of still working from home for looking after everything. And I'm telling you, the general public were
really understanding.
Exceptionally understanding and so very gently warming. During this such a tough time. And
I'm just going to put a sarcasm alert on the bottom of the screen, so in case anybody missed it.
It was honestly, for the 6 weeks that we were at home, it was exceptionally testing. People were unbelievably, completely not understanding. You know, I had somebody actually ask me to leave keys under a park bench for a property so they could go and view it. And I was like, no, you know, this isn't going to happen. Why would anyone do that? And I think the problem now is that we went from full circle back there. No one wanted to stand up for us, but were willing to let us work. I think for many of us who then went on furlough, I know a lot of my colleagues that were on the furlough scheme were almost like grateful to be back, but you were then too scared to sort of say, well, this isn't okay. No guidance on how to be safe. You know, we all had to use our common sense. Doesn't help the fact that then every agent's doing a completely different thing when it comes to viewers, and Yeah, so I think the problem we had is that nobody wanted to be brave enough. And I think as an industry, if we want that mouthpiece, we have to come together. Now, regardless of what people think about ROPA, it's not ARLA or NEA that have decided this is going to happen. They obviously are massive advocates of that, you know, for many reasons, but they're not the ones that have gone, this must happen. And, you know, that's gone way above us. So actually, if we all come together, that's our best way of actually making change, is if we work as one unit rather than against each other going, oh, I don't want to do my qualifications. Well, then no one's going to talk for you. No one's going to represent you.
And my hope is that to members of the public, if we have some sort of a licensing system where, you know, you need a basic qualification to be able to trade as an estate agent, then at least, well, that's a something, isn't it? There's no, at the moment, there is no barrier to entry whatsoever. And it's simultaneously the greatest thing about our industry is that anybody can get into it. And it's simultaneously the worst thing about our industry is that anybody can get into it. And somehow having that qualification in place, meaning that we all have to, what I'm hoping mostly is not only that we'll have a similar standard of service that we're going to be offering people, but we're going to be adhering to a code of ethics.
Yes. And that's something that we're really passionate about at the moment at Propertymark. Yeah. It's a massive part of it. And, you know, our big thing behind the scenes is you would not instruct an unqualified accountant. You would not, you know, instruct an unqualified solicitor. You know, you want to deal with the best of the best, then you need to understand that. Now, for me, I don't think it's as black and white as sitting the exam, because, you know, there's people that have been in the industry for 30, 40 years that have got the most amazing experience. But, you know, then, you know, for me, there must be a threshold to that. You know, is there a way that they, you know, you can use almost time on the job as a buffer for that? You know, it doesn't, you know, not everybody wants to sit in an exam, and that's evident.
It's like where they let you out of prison for good behaviour early, right?
Yeah. But I'm not being funny. If I'd been in the job for 40 years and someone came along and went, you've now got to go sit an exam to do your job, I'd be like, whatever.
Yeah, no, and I think, look, there has to be some sort of test of reasonableness with all of this, and I'm sure as we feel our way along, we'll find out what that is, because we don't want to lose the good guys, and we don't want to lose the people that have been in the industry for years. They built it, you know, and they know how it works. There are some tremendously good agents out there who, ROPA or no ROPA, always do the right thing.
Yeah.
But it's for the agents who you can't necessarily rely on to do the right thing all the time, where we just need a little bit more structure in place. But simple things like training, the importance of training and the importance of continuous professional development is something that seemed like a pain in the ass to get a qualification at the time. Yeah. But let's face it, in your industry, in lettings and management, if you don't keep up with basic standards of the changes in legislation, it's the liability that comes with that as an agent is huge.
Absolutely. And it's just that, and that is what it is, really. You know, you're just trying to stop somebody getting sued. That's, you know, and that's what I say to landlords on valuation. My job is to try and stop you getting sued.
They don't like to hear that sometimes, but that is the simple truth of what you do. You protect your client at all times.
And, you know, I'm having to take that on myself, you know, and the hardest thing is when you go in as a second agent that maybe has been, you know, it's been let out before, and they're going, well, this was never a problem before. And you're like, well, perhaps maybe your agent before hadn't taken the time to actually understand, you know, the legislation. And then therefore you're opening yourself up wide.
Very cool. Okay, so what does the future hold for Megan 18?
Don't know, really.
Because you've got to the stage where you are representing entire counties on behalf, you know, within the industry. You're more vocal on social media about certain things in terms of, you know, women's position in the industry, but also just basic stuff like ROPA as well, and regular stuff. And so you seem to have found your voice, if you like, your public voice as well. And that comes with time, and it comes with a bit of maturity as well, to know that you can have confidence in what it is that you want to say. Yeah. So what is it that you'd still like to achieve?
can I just say the thought of being mature after I've just told you I've set up a TikTok account is so in terms of, for me, I mean, I sat and had this similar question when I applied to be the ARLA rep. And I think for me, I really want to bed into this role now. I think we have a massive opportunity at the moment to really empower our younger female generation now to come into this industry. It's not a boys' club anymore. We need to change that. The gender pay gap stats that came out were shocking.
Unacceptable.
I mean, yeah. I have no words that could, there was agencies that I've always thought, do you know what, one day I might work for them. And I've just gone, yeah, never now, and it's sad. And I think for me, for the next 3 years, I think we need to work on how we can bring more women into the agency world. But we also need to bring in some of these mums back. Let's not rule these people out because they want a family. My spare time, I qualified to be a breastfeeding counsellor so that I could then help people in my spare time. If I can do that, then we can open up the doors to women who want to come back to work and still breastfeed. We must be able to do that. And we need to stop being so close-minded that we all need to be chained to our desks Monday to Friday to make this work. It doesn't have to be that way. And this last year has shown us that. So I think for me, we just need to be more liberal. I think we need to be more open-minded, and we need to actually try and work together. Oh God, you could get me started on this for hours,
She's gone, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm gone.
We're going to leave it recording. I'm going to go to bed. I'll see you in the morning.
Yeah, honestly, I could talk, we could talk mental health. We could talk about women's rights. We can talk about having women in leadership positions. Honestly, there's no
end to it. So maybe how we should end it then is by playing a little game. We're going to play a little game called Agree or Disagree. It's where I read you sometimes often very silly statements and ask you why you agree or disagree with it. Okay?
Shoot.
We'll start with a hard one now, but this will prove to you that I've been reading your LinkedIn post.
Oh, okay.
Agree or disagree, but Gwen Stefani and No Doubt are better than Britney Spears.
Oh, amen. Like, Gwen Stefani is the bee's knees. I couldn't think of an appropriate way to say them.
That sort of raw girl power that you see there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a girly girl. I think probably that's why me and Amy get on so well together. We're both like a bit rough around the edges, which I really love. And Gwen Stefani, when I was growing up, that's all I just wanted to be Gwen Stefani. I wanted to wear really baggy jeans and a crop top, but I was never brave enough to do it. And she's just cool.
I wear crop tops by default. If you ask my wife, she'll tell you my t-shirts just seem to get smaller.
It's going on the Gwen vibe, just in for women's rights. That's all you're up for.
It's a thing, sister. I'm here. I'm hanging them out with you.
Remember,
that's me. Agree or disagree? You don't have to be an ARLA agent to be excellent, but it helps.
Agree. Yeah, I do agree. I think there's some fantastic agents out there that aren't ARLA qualified. I think as long as you are passionate and dedicated to making sure you understand the legislation and the behind the scenes, then yeah, absolutely.
Agree or disagree? Proptech has changed the way that I manage properties.
Yeah, agree. Yeah, no, I do agree. So I think that Proptech has given us the ability to manage properties much more efficiently. I think that there's certainly been things that have hit my DMs on LinkedIn that I thought, this is taking away people, and they're making it a robot job. So for me, it does at the moment. I just think we have to be careful not to go so far that we lose the sort of human element of our jobs. If it all becomes too automated and too electronic, it's very efficient, but it's not
so
as
you're
nice.
Worried we're going to end up like supermarkets where we replace the checkout assistants with those automated checkouts that just continually give me error messages and tell me that there's too many items in the bagging area.
Or even better, have you seen the Amazon supermarket in London, and you just chuck it in your bag? and walk out.
I've never been, but
I've never been. I'm not fancy enough, and London's been like locked down, but it looks amazing.
We should go one day together, and we can feel like we're shoplifting, but like not really be shoplifting.
Only if we go to the cafe that only serves cereal.
Deal, done. Okay, well, enough with the agree or disagree now. I'm going to ask you some other questions. There are 2 other questions now that I have as part of this show. One of them's thanks to Amy. So I'm going to ask you the Amy Shields question first, okay? In the grand movie of your life, because they will make a movie of your life because you're awesome, who's going to play Megan 18?
What's her name? Jennifer Lawrence, because I just think she's really cool.
All right.
Honestly, I'd love to look like Jennifer Lawrence, but the fact that she is able to fall on her face on a red carpet and everyone still think that she's awesome, to me, I think she's the winner there. She's
handy with a bow and arrow. She can. She's got that whole kind of like, she can morph into anything.
She's just super
one of the
cool.
X-Men.
Honestly, when she's in X-Men, she's like next level cool. But to be fair, I think I'd want to be Katniss though. I think if I was going to be any one of her characters, it would be Katniss.
Okay, that's it. You've got that. That's absolutely fine. And the last thing, you've very, very kindly given a total stranger an hour of your time. Now we're not strangers. I can ask you, if you could have an hour of anybody's time, either in the industry or out of the industry, alive or dead, who would you choose to spend an hour with?
Oh, easily, hands down, it will be back with my mum. So I lost my mum 6 years ago, so she never got to meet my little boy. And honestly, I would give anything in the world for her to meet Dexter. And obviously she was an estate agent too, so it's like a double whammy.
Oh, well, that's lovely. That's really lovely. And by the way, that is our most common answer. People tend to go for people that aren't here anymore, and I think that is a lovely thing. You know, we're a bunch of nice people in this industry. Honestly, I don't care whether they think we're nicer than traffic wardens or not.
We're nice people.
We're going to get that public opinion back up, because I think the first step to changing the public opinion is to believe in ourselves and change our opinion of ourselves. And I think that's happening within the industry. I think self-development is a thing. I think, when I hear people boasting about which podcasts they've listened to or books that they've read or training courses that they've been on, it feels like a bit of a willy waving contest, but we're doing it for a good reason. We're encouraging one another to get better. And I think it's awesome. Yeah,
I think you're right. I think we're in a new era now where we've got the opportunity to show people that actually this job comes from a place of honesty, and whether they like it or not, we can't get away with being dishonest, even if we wanted to be. We're so tightly legislated that it's not there. And I think that the more we can shake that off, the better our industry will become.
And on that awesome note, we're going to say thank you to Megan 18 for joining us. We're going to check back in with you because we want a sequel. Megan 19, 20, 21. We're going to check in. I bet you've never heard that joke before, right?
You know what? It's funny. I've never heard any number related jokes before.
You see, my surname Mintz doesn't lend itself to any kind of bullying whatsoever. So variations on that. What was it called at school? Mincemeat, mince pies, polo. I had a whole 3-year period where people would not call me my name. They just call me Polo.
Well, I was 16 and a bit. That was a good one.
That's pretty
good.
And
then obviously I was the youngest of 3. So it was, "Oi, are you 18, sister?" Yeah, that's me.
Megan, thank you very much for giving your time. It sounds like you're an awesome agent, and there's a lot we can learn from you. But it also sounds like we're going to hear a lot more from you as well, because I don't know, Amy sort of said you were beginning to become what she calls shouty on social media.
Oh, once you've got something to shout about, it's got to have the topic first, right?
Keep up the good work. It's excellent. Thank you.